Just to get started here, my name is Julia Sherman. I'm the Director of Education here for the Big Sky Film Institute, and I'm so excited here to introduce and host the film team behind the film Connection, which we hope you've already watched today. It's a short 9-minute documentary. This film is a part of our Native Filmmaker Initiative Film Club program, which runs through the fall semester, and it's a part of our Native Filmmaker Initiative based here at the Film Institute, which aims to bring more Indigenous stories to the festival, support and engage the Indigenous media arts community, and have a greater impact on community youth like yourselves. Just a quick land acknowledgement. I'm beaming in here from the city of Missoula, right here in Montana, which sits on Salish land and is in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish, Kootenai, and Kalispel peoples. Montana is home to 12 tribal nations and 7 Indian reservations, each with its own culture, language, identity, and history. We are uniquely located to elevate Indigenous voices here, and we hope that each day we can all strive to celebrate the stories, histories, and expressions of Indigenous peoples across our state, North America, and the world. This program would not be possible with the generous support of the Dennis, Phyllis, and Washington Foundation, Humanities Montana, and the Office of Public Instruction. And we are so excited to have you all join us here from across the state. So thank you so much. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce Ciara Lacey, the co-director and co-producer of this film, and Autumn Harry, who's the subject of this film. Feel free to give a wave. And OPI's Indian Education Specialist, Mike Jetty. I'd love to just give a chance. I'll start off with a question and then we will open it up to schools. Feel free to put your question into the chat if you're feeling a little shy or your audio's not working. Otherwise, you can use the hand icon to raise your hand and we'll call on your classroom name based on your school. One thing I do like to mention, if you want to mention what school you're coming from in the chat, because it doesn't say on the Zoom name, or you can change that. And feel free to let us know what school and where in Montana you're coming from, because Autumn and Ciara might not know, and the native land and the native areas you're coming from as well. If you're on a reservation or tribal lands, we'd love to hear that, and we encourage that from students. So without further ado, Ciara, would you like to introduce yourself and just say a quick hello, where you're coming from, and just so we can put a face to the name?
Yes, aloha pumehana kako. My name is Ciara Lacey, and I am zooming to you from Honolulu, Hawaii, in the Pacific Ocean. Aloha.
Wonderful. And Autumn Harry, would you mind introducing yourself and letting us know where you're beaming in from on Zoom today?
Ha'u Autumn Harry minani no kuyui papunanaroe no kuyui takata agai takata dene no. Hi everyone, we're so glad that you could join us today. My name is Autumn Harry. I'm from the Pyrmont Lake Paiute Reservation in northern Nevada, just north of Reno. I'm both Paiute and Navajo, and again, really excited to have this conversation with you all. Thank you.
And lastly, but certainly not least, Mike Jetty, would you mind quick introducing yourself and letting us know where you're coming from?
Mohamitaki api, yuha chante waste napta chuzapado, wamblis nalamiero. Hello, my relatives. I greet all of you at the heartfelt handshake. Mike Jetty, member of the Spirit Lake Dakota Nation and a Turtle Mountain Anishinaabe descendant. And I'm coming to you from my office here in Helena, Montana. So glad to be here today.
Wonderful. Well, we're certainly honored to have you guys all join us and all the schools here today. Certainly exciting. I'll start off with a question and then we can open it up to classrooms, and we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and questions as well. I have a question for Ciara. As the director and producer of this film, I'm curious how you first heard about Autumn and how you first connected with her and what pushed you to make a short film about her.
I think this is, that's a great question. And some of this Autumn can speak to as well. My co-director and co-producer on the project, Tracy, she is an incredible angler. So she loves to fish. And one of her goals was to change the image of what we think of as who fishes in this world. She wanted to expand the idea of who we put out into the world as people fishing. And so one of her big goals is she had created an organization called Brown Folks Fishing to support people of color getting on the water and fishing together. And so one of the outcomes of that was this project, this idea of creating a film about fishing. And Tracy's a very big fan of Autumn. Autumn, can you speak to how you and Tracy first met?
Sure. So Tracy founded an organization called Brown Folks Fishing, and the purpose of the organization is to get more Black, Brown, Indigenous peoples, not necessarily out on the water, because I think our communities are already actively fishing and are doing that work, but highlighting those individuals and kind of bringing their stories to the forefront. And it's been a really great way to connect with other anglers. And so I am an ambassador for Brown Folks Fishing, but it's a really great page. They have a really cool social media presence on Instagram, Facebook. And so it's great because you can go to that page and you can see all types of people fishing within their communities and within their homelands. So that's how I originally got connected to Tracy. And since then, we've done different fishing trips together along with this film. And so Brown Folks Fishing is a really great organization to follow.
It's awesome. And I do have one quick follow-up question before we open up to students. And that's, Autumn, I know you're an educator and you're really passionate about fishing, and you yourself have become a guide. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, some of our students might not be super familiar with the Paiute and Navajo background. Can you talk a little bit about how that informs your decision as a fisher person and as an educator in that world?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I know up in Montana, fishing is huge up where you all are. And I'm sure you have a lot of friends and relatives who are involved in fishing. And here in Nevada, we're connected to the Truckee River watershed, which I don't know if you all can raise your hands, but who has heard of Lake Tahoe? Cool. So Lake Tahoe is pretty well known within the Western US. And so if you look at Lake Tahoe then flows through the Truckee River and then north to Pyramid Lake, where my people are from. So we're connected through water. And a lot of people aren't aware of Pyramid Lake. We have a lot of different urban communities upstream who maybe aren't always aware of us downstream, but we have really beautiful fish species. We have the Lahong cutthroat trout, which you may have seen in the film, and we also have the kiwi. And there's a small picture behind my head here on the Zoom. That's our kiwi fish. So we have really important fish species that we're working to protect here downstream. And as far as my background, our Paiute people are definitely fisher people. Here at Pyramid Lake, we call ourselves the Kuyui Takata, which is the kiwi eaters. And again, that's the fish right here. So the kiwi are a huge part of our identity as Paiute people. And my Navajo side, my Dene side is from northern Arizona. And I would say that I don't think we're as much fisher people over there, but my mom is Navajo and she's a big water quality fisher person. And so that's where I get that from is through my parents, who have been actively involved in the protection of water and the protection of fish since I was really young. And so that's how I was able to also kind of come into this work and be involved in fishing from a really young age.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love that part in the film where you talk about when you caught your first fish and giving that to your elder, and that kind of being a part of the tradition of really kind of giving back and giving forward, which was really cool to hear. Students, we'd love to hear from you if you have any questions here, maybe a raise of hands, and we can kind of call on classrooms. You can unmute yourself and we'll answer your question. I see some hands in Beth Barrett's class. If you want to come up to the camera and say your name and ask your question, I'm sure we'd love to answer it here. Oh, they said they don't have a voice option, so they'll type your questions in the chat. That's right. Their question is, if you guys want to type that in the chat, we can get to it. There's another class. We have a question from Magdalene Marma's class, who's in Desmet, which actually Autumn visited when she was at the festival. So you've been to Desmet,
cool.
And so maybe they recognize you. But their
Yeah.
question is from Kat. Her question is, what fish did you fish in the film when you went off your reservation for the first time?
Yes, thank you for that question. So the fish is a cutthroat trout. It's the Lahontan cutthroat trout specifically is what we were fishing for, and the primary trout species that is here at Pyramid Lake. And so there's a really cool and also intense history with the trout. And as you saw in the film, you know, our tribe has been impacted by an upstream dam called Derby Dam. And so that actually decimated our trout species back in the early 1920s and 30s. And our Lahontan cutthroat trout, the ancient Lahontan cutthroat trout, used to be like 39 pounds, you know, 42 pounds, 39 inches. So they're really huge fish that could feed a lot of people. And because of the dam, you know, our fish species were impacted and continue to be impacted because of that. We saw a huge loss of water during that time. And so the Lahontan cutthroat trout are still working really hard to survive, and our people are taking good care of them. But yep, that's the trout that you saw in the film.
Wow, very cool. Very great question. We'll go to Laura Bellis's class. I see a hand up if you want to unmute yourself, say your name and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Charlie. Does it change fishing in the winter? And does the lake freeze up?
Did
So
you hear that
does
question?
the lake freeze up? And then what was the first question again?
How does the fishing change in the winter? How does the fishing change in the winter?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think what's unique about our fisheries here is that we're a winter fishery. The fish during the summertime, I know in different areas, sometimes summer fishing is really good for different rivers or lakes, but here it's the winter time that we do a majority of our fishing. During the summer, it gets so hot here in northern Nevada to where the fish like to go really deep. And so it's hard to access them or fish for them during that time. And so once November starts picking up and it gets colder, the fish tend to come closer to the shore, and that's where we can start fishing for them. So we fish for the trout from November through about the end of April during those spring and winter months. And with our lake, it's so big and there's a lot of different dynamics happening with the water. So our lake actually doesn't freeze up during the winter time. So we're able to fish throughout the whole winter. There's enough, I forget the exact term, but there's a lot of movement happening within the different layers of the lake to where it allows the lake to not freeze.
Great, that's awesome. We've got a question from Beth Barrett's class whose sound does not work. So I'll ask their two-part question, which is one from Dakota, which is what was the process for making this film? And from Lucius and Scylla, how long did it take to make this film? Maybe Ciara, you can answer those questions.
Wow. So making any film, we have several stages. So we have what we call pre-production. That's where we plan. So we come up with an idea, we come up with, you know, a general concept of who we will film, what this general story will be, what the equipment we might use will be, and put together kind of a calendar or a schedule for it. And then we go and do what we call production. So we would go out and do the actual filming. So this took, this was actually shot in two pieces. We shot out in Pyramid Lake with Autumn and her family for about, I think Ryan and Tracy were with you for about 2 days. Is that right, Autumn? And then we shot out in Washington for about 2 days as well. So I would say actual filming for what you saw for the 9 minutes that you, 8-9 minutes that you saw, it took about 4 days of filming. And then once we finish filming, we take everything that we shot, all the footage, and we do what we call post-production. So we'll work on the editing. That took about three to 4 weeks, say probably closer to 4. And then we add in music, And then we add in what we call a sound mix. So it helps to clean up the sound, make sure the sound sounds perfect so you can understand what's going on. And then we do a final pass, which is adding all the color and the graphics. So a lot of times we'll do a color pass to kind of like make sure the color is even from different spots that we shoot, because different locations might have a different feel when we're shooting at different times of day. And while we were filming, Autumn can speak to this too, but we got every type of weather when we're out there in production. It rained on us, it snowed on us, we had sunny days. It was quite the all-weather event. And then when we're done, we make a final version of the film and send it out into the world. Autumn, is there anything you'd like to speak to in terms of the production process?
Yeah, I think the production process was really cool. You don't know it in the film, but I think we were filming in the dark, and that was like at 4 in the morning. And it was really cold on that first day in Washington. And so to see how it all came together is really beautiful, and I'm really thankful that Ciara could share that process.
That's so interesting. I think it's so important here to, you watch a film that's like 9 minutes, 8 minutes long, and sometimes it can be hard to wrap your head around the fact that it takes so long to really put it all together and get the right shots and work as a team and collaborate and all the pieces that come together when you're making a film. So thanks so much for speaking to that. We've got a question from Ronan Middle School. If you'd like to unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Can you hear us? Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you. Just speak loudly.
Let's speak loudly.
Sure.
Say your name.
My name is Lacey Ann Eastman. I am from Ronan Middle School, but I'm really from Crow Agency.
She's from Crow Agency. And what's your question?
Autumn, did you ever catch a catfish?
Ooh, that's a great question. I have not caught a catfish, and I saw another question in the chat that I can also answer. So I've never caught a catfish. I have also never been ice fishing, which was another question in the chat, but both of those seem like a lot of fun. I have fished for bass, and I've also fished for halibut in Alaska, but most of my fishing is done here in my homelands, where I live about 4 miles from the lake. So it's really nice and accessible for me to just fish here. But I really appreciate that question. Have you fished for catfish before?
Oh, but I got chased once.
Okay, I've tasted catfish too, and they're tasty. Thank you.
Those are great questions. We've got a few more in the chat that I might scroll back up to get to. We've got a question from Magdalene Marmon's class from Gemma Hughes, who's curious, how do the fish have your DNA? Which I think was maybe mentioned in the film.
Yeah, no, I know that's a reference, and I think where that stems from is, again, just it being such a huge part of our identity as Paiute people, and it spans for many generations, right? My people specifically have been in this area for thousands of years, and so my ancestors were fisher people and have taught these skills through and have passed on this knowledge through all of these generations, and that's how I'm able to continue on with the same journey of fishing and continuing to pass on that same knowledge to other people that I meet, including you all. And so I think that's really important about the film too, is it's another outlet for education and to continue educating people about Pyramid Lake and our fisheries.
Mm-hmm. That kind of touches on, there's another question from Beth Barrett's class from Mercedes, who is curious what inspired you to begin fly fishing. And I know in the film you talk a lot about the importance of your cultural heritage and your background and your family fishing. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that and how that kind of fuels your passion.
Yeah, so fly fishing, I didn't learn how to fly fish until about 5 years ago. So I think when we think about fly fishing, it tends to be more inaccessible, meaning that fly rods, fly reels, fly equipment is more expensive. And you really need to have people who can teach you. And so I know that I mentioned in the film, and the film was made in 2019. And so a lot has changed since then, but during that time, there weren't a lot of Native people, especially Paiute people, who were fly fishing. And since then, we have seen an increase with more natives fly fishing, which is really great. And I've seen an increase of more of my people and people from my community out fishing with their families as well. So I think that's really positive. And as far as what got me interested, once I learned how to fly fish, I just loved it. I loved it from the very beginning. And it also brought on a lot of these questions like, why haven't I fly fished before? And why isn't it inaccessible? And how can we make it more accessible for our Native communities? And so that's something that I've been working on within the past few years. And especially as I start a guiding business, that's my primary focus.
That's right. You're a guide. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess that's a good kind of transition to talking about what you're doing now and how you've been inspired to keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so I actually started my own guide business in January. So it's almost a year of becoming a fly fishing guide. And I am the first Paiute woman fly fishing guide here at Pyramid Lake. So again, it's been a really exciting journey. And I believe our tribe has allowed for fishing guides since 2003. So within, 19 years, there has never been a woman guide until I came along. And it's been really amazing with the people who have been booking trips. A majority have been women, families, and it's just really great to see, to kind of use my business as a way to teach more people as well. And so when people come fishing with me, we go fishing, but also they're learning about the history of my homelands. They're learning about the water rights, the water quality, and we're talking about the fish species. And so, as along with fishing, they're also getting a lot of education in that process as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I see a question from Mike Jetty in the chat, but Mike, do you want to ask it? And then we can move on to Logan's class next after that.
Sure, I just had a quick question on, do tribal members need a license when fishing on the reservation, or how does that work? Or can you fish in traditional territories?
Yeah, so again, going back to the other question of, have I fished all these other places? I think the primary reason why I do fish from home is because tribal members do get free access. So we don't have to pay for a Nevada state license. We're able to, we have a lot of different rights that non-tribal members do when it comes to fishing. And so it is really accessible to our communities in that way. Whereas if I were to even go, 35 miles into Reno, I would have to pay for gas money. I would have to pay for a license. And so once you start adding those things on top of it, it becomes more inaccessible. Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Super fascinating. Great question. And Logan's class, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Annabeth, and I had two questions. My first one was, what was y'all's inspiration for the film? Like, what made you want to do this, except for wanting to do something about fishing and fly fishing and stuff? What was y'all's true inspiration? Was there anyone who wanted to do it and you were the first person do it first? Or I don't know. Just what was y'all's inspiration for it?
Do you have a second question too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my second question is, have you ever had any other hobbies besides fishing, like kayaking or snowboarding or anything?
Cool. I'll let Ciara answer the first question, then I can answer the second.
Yeah, I think one of the things that connected us to telling the story was the idea of conservation. So just the protection of water, protection of our fish. And, as a Native Hawaiian, I think Indigenous representation and Native representation and putting Native and Indigenous faces on screen is important. So I've sort of put my career as a filmmaker front and center around that. So I've worked with a lot of communities to help, support and tell their stories, and including my own community too. So I think what drives me as a creative is this idea of putting forward my people and other Native and Indigenous peoples, and really talking about, our collective survival based on conservation.
Yeah, thank you, Ciara. I really love your second question. I forget, there's so many things that I'm involved with in my community, but some of my other hobbies include backpacking and hiking, and I'm also an artist as well. So I did my first mural back in 2020, and I'll work on trying to pull up a picture maybe, or I can send it to Julia, but it was a 8 by 20 foot mural, and it was of Lahontan cutthroat trout. And so I do like to do art, and I'm also a community organizer. So I organize different events in my community, and in the film, I say, like, I don't call myself an activist, because I feel like the work that I do is a responsibility. And so I, as a Native person especially, feel like I have a responsibility to protect the fish, to protect land and water, and also to do what I can to protect the communities that I'm connected with as well. And then another thing that I'm doing now is I'm also a master's student studying geography at my university. So there's a lot of different hats that I wear. And yeah, I appreciate that question, because I was like, oh yeah, I do other things besides fishing.
I think that can be sometimes easy to forget when you watch a film about someone, of like, oh yeah, this is a dynamic, layered person and they have a whole other life.
Yeah.
Really great question. There is a question in the chat from Joe Miller from Desmet Middle School, and he's curious if you've ever caught a big mouth bass.
I think I have. I don't know the difference between smallmouth and big mouth. So maybe I'll have to double check, but I've definitely gone bass fishing, and that was only recently. That was I was fishing with one of my sisters in Owens Valley, which is by Bishop, California, and we went fishing for bass and caught my first bass, I think, in June. So very recently started fishing more for bass.
Great question. These are fish curious students here. I'm learning a lot about different fish types myself. Next question will go to Laura Bellis's class. If you have another question, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Zohara from Cook City School. How many fish species are in Pyramid Lake, and which one is your favorite to catch?
Ooh, I love this question too. So we have 5 different fish species. So we have the kiwi, which is an endemic suckerfish species, which means that it's only found in Pyramid Lake. And what's really cool about the kiwi is that they have long lifespans, so they can live to be 45 to 50 years old. So they can live a long time, which is amazing. And they mostly feed on the bottom of the lake, because they have those sucker mouths. So that's one. And then we have the Lahontan cutthroat trout, which is the one that I've been talking most about. We also have the Tahoe sucker, which is another sucker fish species. And then we have the tui chub, and the tui chub are a lot smaller. But the tui chub are important because that is the main food source for the Lahontan cutthroat trout. So that's what they like to feed on, and that's how they're able to get so big. And then the last one is the Sacramento perch. And the perch, I actually haven't caught a perch before, but I know that during the summertime, the perch come up closer to the shore, and that's when you can go perch fishing. So there's 5 different species. I don't remember, I don't think I was able to touch on the film too much about this, but the kiwi, that's the fish here that our people have this really strong connection to. Because of the dam, the kiwi are on the endangered species list. And so our people can't even fish for kiwi anymore. We're in the process of trying to get their population levels back up, but they're currently endangered. So we can't fish for kiwi. And if anyone catches a kiwi, they have to release it. So our people aren't really able to fish or eat them unless it's like for a cultural purpose. So I would say, just to answer your second question, my favorite is to fish for the Lahontan cutthroat trout, because that is the one that is most abundant within the lake. And I think last season someone caught a 27-pounder. So we get really large fish here. They grow to be a really beautiful and good size.
Oh, that is huge. That
they're
kind of
huge.
leads to this next question from Cody Munson's class. Owen is curious if you release the fish that you catch, and it sounds like depending on the fish, you release them, or which ones you eat.
Yeah, so our tribe has very strict protocols and regulations on what sizes people can keep. And so if they're within a certain size range, between like 20 and 24 inches, those fish are usually best for spawning. And so we have to always put those back. It's required. And it really depends. I think a lot of, who here has heard about catch and release? Cool, there's a few hands there. So catch and release is becoming more common, to where people can go fishing, they'll catch the fish, make sure that they're using proper fish handling protocols, to where that increases the survival of that fish, and then they'll let them go back into the lake or stream or river to where they can continue to live. And so a lot of people are moving towards catch and release. For me, because our trout are a part of our traditional foods, our people continue to eat trout. And depending on if my freezer is getting low and I don't have fish in the freezer, then I will keep fish. If my freezer has trout stocked in there, then I'll release the fish. And that's kind of how I determine if I keep or release a fish back into the lake. Thanks for that question.
Great questions. We'll take a question from Ronan Middle School again. If you guys would like to unmute yourself, and remember to speak loudly and clearly so we can hear you.
Hi, my name's Karen Cook, and I want to know how it feels to fly fish.
Ooh, you want to know how it feels? So fly fishing, there's so many different types of fly fishing, and it varies if you're going to fish from a lake or a river or a stream. Everything's constantly changing. And then you also have to factor in temperature and wind and what season it is, where you think the fish might be. So I think fly fishing, it was challenging when I first started. And because our fish are so big here, we have to use a larger rod, which maybe if you go to a river is going to be way too big for that river system. And our style of fishing, we use a really large rod. It's about 11 feet long. And I guess that allows for us to catch those big fish. But when I first caught my first fish on the fly rod, it was really exciting. And I think I lost it because I got so excited. But once you really get into it, you use really thick line, and you kind of use your hands to pull in the fish versus like a reel. So we use our fish to reel that fish in, and we tug on that line. And it's really cool because you can feel the fish on the other end, and you can say like, okay, what direction is it heading? Is it coming towards me? Is it wanting to swim out? And so in a way you can connect to that fish even more, because you're kind of thinking like, okay, what does it want to do? And it's really exciting. I hope, I know that fly fishing is really big up there, and I think it's cool that more and more people are creating programs to get more youth involved in fly fishing too. And so I hope that you're able to get some opportunities to where you can try fly fishing out.
That's super informative. I've never fly fished, so I'm learning a lot here too today. We actually have one more question from Ronan Middle School, if you want to ask your question, and then we'll move on to another class. And then maybe Mike will share a little bit about Montana fishing.
Autumn, did you ever visit Montana?
I have. So I came to Montana back in 2018 was the first time. And then I was in Missoula for the Big Sky Film Festival. So I've been to Missoula. I've also been to the area like of Bozeman, and I fished in May. I actually flew into Bozeman and went down to Ennis, Montana, and we fished for brown trout there on the fly rod. And that was really fun. And again, because it's so much different than how I would fish here, it's always a learning curve for me. So no matter how long I've fly fished, I always continue to learn more depending on where I'm visiting and where I'm going. So there's never, we're always constantly learning.
Did you visit Crow?
I haven't visited Crowd yet, but I would love to. And I have some friends who are also from there, who are also community organizers. So I really hope to make it there someday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds like you've got a extra connection there as well.
Yeah, I'll hit up Ronan Middle School when I do.
We'll take a question from Logan's class if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, I have a couple questions in one. So the first one is kind of, what was your favorite part of the filming process?
You want to ask the other one too?
Sure, yeah, okay. And then I was also like, did you learn anything from the experience and like throughout filming? And then do you have any like big takeaways from filming?
Great questions. Ciara, do you want to take that first question? And then Autumn, do you want to take the second one?
I loved getting out on the water. Our 2 days in Washington were really incredible for me. I am someone who appreciates people who fish, but I'm a novice fisher person. So it was really, really fun to be able to witness Autumn out on the water and see all the work that goes into trying to catch something. So that was my favorite part. That's a great question. Thank you for asking. Autumn, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think my favorite part, I think documentation is so important. And, because we were filming back in 2018, that was like or was it 2019? Now I'm getting confused. It was 2019, right? Okay. It was 2019. So I mean, that was 3 years ago almost. And I think it's really cool to look back at the film and to see, to really be thankful for the connections that we made with Ciara and Tracy. And I really feel that, the film has had a big impact on different communities for people who view it, and hopefully does kind of help shift the thinking around fly fishing and accessibility. And but I also think it's really cool to look back on it. And at the time, I wasn't planning on being a fly fishing guide. I don't even think it was really a thought in my head when we were filming. So to watch that film now and to see that I'm guiding today and I have clients and I'm like a guide, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. So a lot is shifting and changing, and I feel that a lot of us are continuing to grow, and so that's always exciting to me. But I'm really thankful for that piece of documentation during 2019.
Very cool. Great questions out there, you guys.
Yeah, and sorry, just to go back to your second question, I just want to, acknowledge that I did learn a lot when we visited Washington and we were fishing in Olympic National Park. And I had never fished for steelhead before. So, you know, it's really important that before we visit places, if we're going to go hiking or fishing or recreate in any way, that we do our research before we visit those places and we think about, okay, I'm going to go to Montana and, you know, I'm going to see whose ancestral homelands I'm visiting. And I'm going to see, you know, see what tribes are currently there, and is there a way that I can give back to those communities? Do they have an organization that I can donate to while I'm traveling through, or do they have a cultural center or a museum that I can visit? So I think that's always something that should be in the back of our minds when we're traveling. Even as a Native person, I want to make sure that I'm also being respectful when I'm visiting other people's homelands.
That's a really great point. Thanks for pointing that out. I'm wondering, that kind of leads us to our next question, and then we'll have time for maybe one more class question after Mike. But Mike, I'm wondering if you can make some connections to Montana with this film. There's in the history of different fishing practices, and maybe share some examples of some modern day water packs that have been made between tribes in the state.
Sure.
I know you have some cool photos you could share as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to get them up. I thought I was able to pull it up, but I just had a couple of pictures I wanted to share real quick. And then, you know, in Montana, we have Indian Education for All, and we have these essential understandings about Montana Indians, and thinking about Native tribes all across the United States, you can kind of use these 4 themes of diversity, culture, history, and sovereignty. And this film hits on all those themes. I mean, think about the diversity amongst different tribes, and like your tribe, Autumn, you know, historically are fishermen. You know, in Montana, we have a lot of buffalo tribes, but then also the Salish and Kootenai, you know, they were fishing tribes out here. And then the culture definitely impacts, you know, that identity and the relationship with fish, because I'm sure, you know, just like we have songs about buffalo and other animals out here, you guys probably have songs and ceremonies to go along with the different types of fish and how that fits in with your history. But then also reaffirming sovereignty, you know, like, you know, tribal members don't need a license to fish on the reservation. But here are just a couple of cool historic photographs about fishing. This one over here is a fishing wear from the Kootenai, who were up on the Flathead Reservation, but this picture was taken in Canada. But the Salish also used to develop these big fishing wares to, you know, bring in the trout, and they would get trapped in there. A really cool way to fish. And this man up here, he's a Pomo or Hoopa Indian, I'm sorry, from California, and he's got a giant fishing net. And so he's using a net to catch fish, you know, standing on a dam. And then these are Ojibwe women who are drawing fish. And so, you know, a lot of different tribes had a really cool historic connection with fish, and still do today. But Autumn brought this up about the importance of our environment and protecting it and making sure we have clean water. And tribal nations are dealing with climate change and how that's impacting cultural traditions. And so whatever we can do to preserve and maintain, you know, our water, it's huge. And so just keep that in mind too. And I just wanted to share this. This was just an article today from the Great Lakes. Some tribes out there reached an agreement, you know, they're using their treaty language, you know, to, you know, so they can still, you know, practice traditional tribal fish gathering practices out there. And then also balance that out with, you know, people who just want to recreate and fish. So, you know, these issues are real for tribal folks. Tribes are still exerting their sovereignty and traditional cultural practices around and fish. And so and I'm actually wearing a killer whale bolo tie that was gifted to me by some coastal tribes. And those tribes actually still go out and harvest whale. You know, it's guaranteed in their treaties. And so just there's all kinds of cool fishing traditions, and it's really neat to see what you're doing, Autumn, you know, taking it to a whole other level. And so thank you for doing that. So those are just a few things I wanted to share. And you know what you call a fish with no eyes? So there's your bad joke for the day. Well, thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Mike. It's so helpful, and it helps provide some context and some good laughs, which we always appreciate. That's awesome. And such a nice reminder. I think the film really touches on so many of the things we're talking about, even just within the title, connection. And Autumn, you talk about this in the film of just, you know, fishing in the open water and really recognizing this connection between all the different waterways and the fish in all these different areas. And it's a nice reminder here in the state of Montana as we're learning, and maybe there's some fisher people here that can kind of help, you know, provide some context for when we're out in nature and doing that fishing. It's all kind of connected in these ways, and it's a really nice reminder. I know we said we had time for one other question, but unfortunately we have run out of time. Though I would encourage, I'm putting my email in the chat here for people to send me their questions, and I can pass them along to Autumn and Ciara, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them. I don't want to take too much else of our time. There's so many more questions that we could get to.
There's so many
today.
questions.
There's endless. You can see the
I had
hands
a
raising.
question for everyone. I want to see a raise of hands if you love fishing. Yeah. That's great.
Maybe,
I see all those hands.
and if anybody hasn't tried fly fishing now, or if they're a little bit more curious about it, maybe a raise of hands.
Cool. That's exciting.
Very rad. If Autumn, is there anything else you'd like to add today, or any questions I didn't ask that you want to touch on before we leave today?
Sure. So some of the work that I'm doing now, my friend and I actually organized a Paiute women's fly fishing retreat this past April. And so that was our work was focused on getting more Paiute women into fly fishing. And so we had a 3-day workshop where women got to learn how to cast, they got to learn how to tie flies, and got to learn how to, I guess a big part of it was a lot of the women aren't necessarily from Pyramid Lake, but come from other tribes. And so we took them to the fisheries, and they got to look at the hatchery and view the spawn channel and understand the process in which our fish are able to, you know, survive and be successful. So that was a big part of it. But thank you all for coming. And, you know, I'm wanting to organize more events for youth as well to get more youth involved in fishing. But I appreciate you all for your time. And yeah, really thankful that you all could join us.
That's awesome. It really is our pleasure hosting you guys. Ciara, was there anything we missed out before we let these students go?
No, I thought there were some really incredible questions, and it was such a thrill to be able to connect with everyone, and as always talk about this film. And thank you, everyone. Super cool.
Really rad. Mike, anything we're missing here today?
No, just glad to be a part of the conversation, and thanks to all you students and teachers for tuning in and watching the film, and hopefully we'll have some cool programs next year again. So
yeah.
So thank you.
Keep an eye out. Every fall, Mike and I work really closely together to curate a triptych of films for the Native Filmmaker Initiative Film Club, and we come up with a new film theme every year. And they're all documentaries, and they all focus around Native and Indigenous peoples. So keep an eye out for that in the spring and the summer. We're already starting to think about films for next year. The Film Institute is also a film festival in February, which is how we actually first met Autumn and Ciara a few years ago. And teachers, if you're interested in students as well, we have a Filmmakers in the Schools program that runs virtually as well as in person, where we bring filmmakers from the festivals into classrooms, similar to this. And we also, if you're in high school, we have a really rad program that runs the first weekend of the festival called our Teen Doc Intensive, where you get to make a short documentary film that we screen during the festival. So applications for that are open. So feel free to email me if you're curious about any of those programs. We'd love to plug you in. Thank you so much, Autumn, Ciara, and Mike, for joining us in all the classrooms today. We really appreciate it. We always learn so much, and it's so fun to be able to start these conversations and hear your questions and your insights. So we hope to see you in February and maybe next fall, but until then, feel free to email me your questions, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.